the end of conflict. Jiddu Krishnamurti. For me, the most important thing in life is to have a religious mind, because then everything else falls into the right state of relationship. Everything, occupations, health, marriage, sex, love, and the countless problems and tribulations that life offers us, everything is understood. A religious mind is not something easily attainable through reading a few books, listening to a series of lectures, or training oneself into a certain posture. The mind, which includes both the conscious and the unconscious, as we have noted, is a vast field of contradiction. It is entirely caught up in a great struggle, torn by many conflicts, battles, and the shocks of desire. And in such conditions, the mind has no possibility of understanding what it means to be religious. Whatever one does, whether going to church, reading sacred books, or performing any of the other things we usually do in our childish attempts to discover if there is a God, if there is an afterlife, this mind will never find that extraordinary religious state. This is a very complex problem, and to examine it, we need a mind that is capable of looking, of observing, without immediately saying, "What I see pleases me. I like this," or "I don't like this." We need a scientific mind, a mind that does not distort or color what it sees. The important thing is to bring about a transformation in the very process of our thinking, in the very matrix, the very composition of the mind. A revolution is necessary, not an economic or social revolution, but a revolution in consciousness in the very core of our being. And such a revolution can only occur when we understand this issue of conflict. Conflict at any level of consciousness, whether superficial or deep, is the factor of deterioration. Please observe your own state. But how do you observe yourself? Do you observe as an observer looking at something separate from yourself, in which case there is a division, a contradiction between the observer and the observed? Or do you observe without the presence of the observer? Please follow this, because it is important. When we are observing the extremely complex process of our own consciousness, whose very essence is conflict, we must understand what we mean by looking, observing. I am sure most of us observe as someone outside looking in. You are aware of your conflicts, and you observe them as a censor, as a judge, as an observer, separate from the thing being observed. This is generally what we do, and it is what prevents us from understanding this very complex thing called conflict, its enormous weight and content, its varieties. When you observe as someone looking from the outside in, you undoubtedly create conflict, don't you? You are not understanding the conflict, but merely making it greater. Aware of the conflict within yourself, the observer says, "I need to change this. I don't like conflict. I like pleasure." The observer, therefore, always has this attitude of judgment, of censoring, and when you observe in this manner, you are not understanding the conflict. On the contrary, you are multiplying it. Have I made this point clear? I would like you to perceive this fact once and for all, to perceive its truth and beauty, for then you would know what it means to look, not with the eyes of a censor, but simply to look. If you look with the eyes of a censor, you will increase your conflict. But if you observe without a center, you will begin to understand this extraordinary process called consciousness, which is the very essence of conflict, of struggle, which is an incessant striving to become, to suppress, to achieve. The mind can in no way understand itself through analysis, because in analysis there is separation between the analyst and the thing analyzed, and thus growing and continuous conflict. Every analysis, every effort of probing, inquiry, and investigation starts from the center, already conditioned, burdened with the accumulations of time, which is the known. There is certainly a difference between perception and analysis. If you see this difference clearly, then it will also become clear that analysis does not bring about any revolution. Analysis may help you adjust to society, remove some of your quirks, your idiosyncrasies, your neuroses, but that is not what we are dealing with. We are talking about something much more fundamental than mere adjustment to a corrupt society. Analysis assumes an analyst and a thing analyzed. The analyst is the censor, the judge who examines, interprets, condemns, or approves what is being seen, and therefore creates more conflict. That is not at all what we are doing. We are doing something entirely different, which is trying to understand the conflict that exists, not only externally in the world, but also within us. I am using the word understand in the sense of observing without taking a position. When you do that, you already have a field of observation where there is no conflict. I don't know if you are perceiving the truth of this. For the man or woman who truly wishes to understand the beauty, the extraordinary meaning of a life free of conflict, and I say that such a life is possible, the most important thing is to be totally aware of the entire content of consciousness. To be totally aware does not mean analyzing, but simply observing. And there lies our greatest difficulty, because through millennia of habit, we have been trained to judge, to condemn, to compare, to identify. This is our instinctive reaction, and therefore we never really observe. We have been trained from childhood to acquire knowledge, to compete. We learn a technique, specialize in a certain direction, to have a job, and earn a living. This is the essence of our education. So we continue to live on the surface. So can you, who live in a world made of conflict, who maintain conflict through fulfillments and frustrations, and who are demanded to live in conflict in a state of self-contradiction, can you, through sensitivity to this entire process, become totally free from conflict? Surely only the mind without problems, without the scars of conflict, is innocent, and only the innocent mind can know the immeasurable. Now, hold on a moment. That fan is making noise here in this hall. How do you listen to that? If that noise is irritating you, if it is something separate from you, then consciously or unconsciously, you are resisting it because you want to listen. But if that noise, the fan's hum, is part of your attention, then there is no resistance. You are that noise. With the same mental state, can you look at the entire process of your consciousness with its contradictions, desires, ambitions, impulses, compulsions, fulfillments? You are all of that. You are not an observer looking at something separate from yourself. Therefore, there is no resistance, no conflict between you and that thing, as long as there is separation between the thinker and the thought. There will be conflict, won't there? Please understand that this is where the root of that separation lies. In all forms of conflict, dull the mind, wear out the brain. They paralyze and desensitize the brain. Therefore, to produce a state free of conflict, it is necessary to understand this division. Please, do not accept anything the speaker is saying. Look at it without accepting or rejecting it, but trying to perceive the fact individually through the observation of yourself. Once you truly grasp the profound meaning of observation, you will discover that the very process of observing, of seeing, is the end of conflict, because it eliminates the separation between the observer and the observed. This division is completely erased, and therefore you are not observing thought as a separate entity. You are that thought, not a thinker observing the thought. So, if this is understood, let us examine that complex thing called the ego, which is the I, the field of consciousness. Without self-knowledge, the eternal cannot emerge. Only through awareness of what is true from moment to moment does one discover that which is infinite, the eternal. When we do not know ourselves, the eternal becomes just a word, a symbol, a speculation, a dogma, a belief, an illusion for the mind to escape into. But if one begins to understand the self in all its various activities day by day, then in that very understanding, without any effort, the unnameable, the eternal, emerges. But the eternal is not a reward for self-knowledge. That which is eternal cannot be pursued. The mind cannot acquire it. It emerges when the mind is quiet, and the mind can only be quiet when it is simple, when it is no longer storing up, condemning, judging, weighing. The matrix is complex, but each of us holds a part of the solution. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and together we'll see beyond appearances.